The 17th of June, 1944, 9:22 hours. A sun-bleached lane, north of Saint-Lô, Normandy. A Wehrmacht driver eases second gear and grins at his loader. Fliegende Milchflasche, he says, the flying milk bottle. The column laughs in relief because the rumor said American P-47 seconds are fat, slow, clumsy. A cow of an airplane. Someone in the third truck mimes a wobbling barrel with wings. A couple of men chuckle so hard they cough. Hedgerows hem the road into a green tunnel stone. Thorns and shadow. It smells like summer and petrol. Halt! The lead Kubelwagen brakes. A scout runs back, mouth tight. Off to the west there's the faintest thread of noise, like steam singing under a door. Then the noise thickens an approaching weight rather than a sound. One of the Panzer Grenadiers squints up at a pale disk of sky beyond the hedgerow lattice and sees a silver sliver slide across the square of blue. Nur eine. He says only one. The forward air controller kneeling on a verge 2 fields away doesn't see smiles. He sees a map grid half erased by his own muddy thumb, a thin pencil line to the road bend, and a sky that's all glare and gnats. He cups a hand over the handset. Ridge 1, confirm single jug, 2 eggs, 1 pass, north to south. The rifle platoon behind him has learned to breathe during the radio clicks. Breathe on, transmit, hold on, receive, breathe when the pilot answers. Ridge 1, 2500 correction, 2500 pounds today. Stand by. The German driver has time to spit a sunflower hull and turn the steering wheel a finger's width to clear a ragged culvert. The whistle grows teeth. The hedgerow shadows pop with sunlight, as if someone opened and closed a door too fast. The first thing they feel is not fear but confusion. Why is the hedgerow suddenly full of glitter? Ridge 1 tally, the pilot says, flat, as if he's checking an address. He breathes once. He's already in the dive, nose down at roughly 45 degrees, wind clawing at the canopy frames. The jug's big 4-blade prop bites air like a buzz saw through water, and the airplane, huge on the ground, has become a spear in freefall. The pilot's left thumb slides the pickle switch guard. The right hand is feather, light on the stick, iron, heavy in intention. In his peripheral vision, the bombs canted under his wings are little, obedient suns. At 900 meters of altitude, the lane isn't a road anymore, it's a ruler. Trucks become rectangles. The Panzer in the middle of the column is a dark thumbprint with a shadow like a knife. Steady, steady. His own voice is a metronome in the headset. He lets the nose rise a hair to float the pipper, because at this angle, this speed, the gun sight dot must touch the front bumper of the third truck if the bombs are to walk the road. His elbows are quiet. His heartbeat is louder than the engine now, but he doesn't feel it. He's thinking in time, 5, 4, 3. The German loader notices the shape only when it has already become noise. He says something that dies in his throat. The laugh he shared a minute ago becomes a cough that doesn't end. Pickle 1, the pilot says, and the left wing lurches an inch as the first 1,000-pounder drops and the shackle snaps free. Pickle 2. The second bomb slides off, clean, as he continues to ride the thin line between precision and panic. He feels the ship lighten and climb a whisper, but he keeps her pointed like the tip of a nail at the hinge of the road. The jug hisses downward, another heartbeat too, and then the pilot pulls. The horizon yanks upward. The hedgerows swell, and something in his back teeth rings as if he swallowed a bell. The bombs are already clocks now, 2 iron arguments that will be settled in roughly 15 seconds if air and gravity agree. He breathes out for the first time since tally. He does not look back. The column hears the first bomb, before they understand it. A rip in the air thick enough to touch. Then the hedgerow flexes like a fist opening, and the road unwraps. The second bomb arrives with a slab-flat shove that removes the middle of the column from the world and replaces it with light, dust, and pieces of truck floated like confetti. The Panzer's commander sees the turret ring jump and a shape he knows the loader's left-hand whirl like a single pale leaf in autumn. The pilot doesn't watch any of this. He has rolled level, throttled up, and the jug is a locomotive 3 feet above the wheat, dumping 8 50-caliber guns into the trailing vehicles. The bullets make a zipper out of steel and men. A truck's bonnet flies open like a gull's wing. A motorcycle and sidecar slither sideways as if yanked by an invisible fisherman. He walks the stream for maybe 2 seconds more than doctrine says is polite, because doctrine didn't see what those men did to a medic truck yesterday. Over his shoulder, the bombs finish their sentences. The second one finds the culvert's weak seam and amplifies it into a crater you could hide a house in. The road is gone. The laughter is gone with it. Somewhere, someone still alive cannot hear, but his body keeps trying to crawl toward a hedgerow that is now 10 feet further away. Comms crackle. Good hits, Ridge 1. Very good hits. Another voice tight, different cuts in. Cab rank is hot. Mark next, bend with smoke. The pilot answers without drama. Ridge 1, RTV Winchester bombs, full up guns. He is a professional. He does not keep score. He does keep time. And that's the truth hiding inside the myth of the flying milk bottle, the fat plane that arrived like a mistake and left like mathematics. In Normandy's hedgerow country, jokes evaporated at the speed of a 1,000-pound bomb and the persistence of 8 Browning machine guns. At a certain point in 1944, the jug stopped trying to be loved and started to be inevitable. The men on that road will never understand the engineering that made it possible, the industrial switchyard that shipped the bombs, or the spreadsheet logic that matched a call sign to a grid square, but they will understand this. Something they once laughed at, removed the middle of their world in less time than it takes to tell a joke. Let's press pause on that frozen second before the pilot's thumb touched the switch. Rewind the scene and widen the lens. The jug didn't fall out of the sky as a miracle. It arrived as a system that married weight to will, numbers to nerves. The mathematics of modern ground attack payload, time to target, the habit of hauling iron through flak and coming back for more, turned a punchline into a doctrine. That's the story we're going to tell. How the American P-47 learned to carry 2,500 pounds of bombs, and how a war learned to stop laughing. If you strip the paint and the sentiment off the early war reputation, what you're left with is a silhouette. Enormous radial up front, a bathtub fuselage, a wing thick enough to make purists sniff. The P-47 looked like an accident in 3 views. Next to the elegant Razorbacks and svelte inline fighters, the Thunderbolt was a beer keg with ideas. Pilots who saw it on the ramp for the first time rehearsed polite words in case they were posted to fly it. Enemies who glimpsed it overhead dropped jokes down into diaries. Die fliegende Milchflasche. And then the jokes had to make peace with physics. The Thunderbolt's 8 Browning. 50 seconds were not a flourish, they were a theory of war. The airframe had been built strong because Pratt & Whitney's R2800 was a physical argument. A 2,000-plus horsepower furnace attached to a GE turbo supercharger with ducting like a small railway and a propeller that grabbed air by the handful. Weight was the price of power and survivability. Instead of trying to hide that weight, Republic weaponized it. In a power dive, mass becomes momentum. In a strafing pass, mass becomes stability. The milk bottle carried not just firepower but forgiveness. Pilots discovering the airplane's personality learned they could be a little late on the pull, a little low in the weeds, a little aggressive through light flak, and the jug would shrug where sleeker machines might sulk. Early missions asked the P-47 to be a high-altitude escort. It did the job well enough to prove its engine and its legs, but the airplane's soul, if airplanes can be said to have souls, revealed itself at medium altitudes and below, where airdromes and rail yards became chessboards and roads became pipelines. The shift from escort to fighter bomber wasn't a demotion, it was a specialization. War in Western Europe had an appetite for flexibility. The Thunderbolt delivered calories. Listen to the choreography of a typical 1,944 day in a P-47 group after dawn. Briefings heavy on grids and bridges, maps creased like old hands, ordnance crews rolling thick-cased GP bombs across pierced steel plank with a clatter you felt in your boot soles. Armourers fed belts into wings until the gun bays looked like butcher blocks, brass glinting under the panels. Crew chiefs thumped tyres, tugged cowl fasteners, and spoke in the definite tense, "You'll be back." The pilot strapped into a cockpit that wrapped around him like a safe. When the engine caught, the ground trembled the way you want the earth to tremble, when you go to war like something ancient and reliable waking up. The jokes started to fail in the face of the jug's behaviour. Its climb rate with a heavy belly didn't win beauty contests, but once moving it was a freight train that could turn. When the pilot shoved the nose down, the airplane became a falling anvil that could be steered with a finger. When the pilot lined the pipper on a truck and squeezed, the 8 guns didn't chatter so much as purr with violence. The airplane barely fidgeted while shoveling metal forward. It looked clumsy right up until it didn't. Enemy pilots discovered a separate, unpleasant surprise. The jug could soak damage that would empty the lives of slimmer machines. Self-sealing tanks drank bullets and wept fuel, but the engine stayed lit. Armor plate behind the seat kept good men in the conversation long enough to get home. A Thunderbolt limping into pattern with oil streaking the windscreen, 2 cylinders dead, and holes in the wing big enough to thread your arm through was not a freak headline. It was Tuesday. On the other side of the battle, German ground troops, initially welcoming any aircraft not called Typhoon or Spitfire, learned to recognize the new normal by sound, a square-shouldered thunder you could count into. The jug's strafing passes didn't flutter, they pressed. The first time a formation of P-47 seconds bent a railway marshalling yard into bolts and memories, a railwayman called the police. The police looked up and didn't answer their own phone. The transformation from joke to juggernaut hinged on 3 quiet revolutions. First, pilots and controllers learned to talk to each other like surgeons, clear, brief, technically literate. A cab rank of fighter bombers could loiter overhead, peel off when called, and deliver ordnance within spoken bookends. Bridge, north abutment, west to east run, release not below 3,000. Second, ground and air planners broke the battlefield into arteries and clots, roads, bridges. Rail yards then fed P-47 seconds the diet that would starve divisions without theatrics. Third, and most important, the industrial pipeline behind the Thunderbolt turned sorties into a utility. Ammunition, bombs, tires, engines, the jug's look made sense because it was a flying promise. We can carry it, we can take it, and we will be there again this afternoon. The German nickname meant as a shrug became ironically accurate. A milk bottle is not a broadsword, it's a container. The Thunderbolt's stout fuselage and broad wing were containers for energy, chemical and kinetic, and for margin. Margin means you can be human and still succeed. Margin means your airplane will absorb a rookie's ham-handedness and a veteran's overconfidence. Margin means you can carry a lot of bomb. By mid-1944, 2,500 pounds of bomb, to be exact, became a practical, repeatable combat load. 2 1,000-pound GP bombs under the wings and a 500-pounder on the belly rack, or 1,005 on the wings with a spare on the centerline, depending on the mission and the weather. Add in a brace of 5-inch HVAR rockets when called for, and the jug was, in plain language, a bomb truck with fighter blood. A machine built to meet a Bf 109 on terms could now take apart a bridge, ambush a column, or erase a locomotive in the time it takes a man to light a cigarette. If you want one line that captures the mood shift, it's this. The laughter stopped the first time a unit that thought it was safe from air because of a hedgerow, a cloud deck, or a rumor discovered that the P-47 didn't care what stories men told themselves. It cared about grids, angles, fuel, and steel. If bravery is doing what frightens you, the jug's particular bravery was monotony. Take off, pick up weight, drive it into the problem, come back, repeat. Jokes can survive an argument. They cannot survive a schedule. War is a lot of language wrapped around a little physics. To explain why the P-47 stopped being a punchline the day it started hauling 2,500 pounds of bombs as a matter of course, we can run the numbers the way ordnance officers and pilots did on scrap paper that smelled of oil and lunch. Payload. Start with the simple headline. A typical late-war Thunderbolt fighter-bomber loadout, 2 1,000-pound general-purpose bombs on the wing pylons, and one 500-pound bomb on the centerline. That's 2,500 pound of argument before you count the 8 wing guns that are always along for the ride. Swap options around, sometimes a 1,000 and a 500 under the wings, plus a 500 on the belly when range or runway length suggested it. But the point stands. You are pushing a small truck's worth of iron into the sky and deciding, at a time of your choosing, where gravity should return it to the earth. Dive, geometry, and time on target. The Jug's favorite attack profile for rail yards, bridges, and road columns was a 40-45 degrees dive from around 8,000 feet down to a release around 3,500 feet above the target. At roughly 400 miles per hour in the dive, that gives you on the order of 11 seconds from pushing the nose down to weapons release. Geometry at 45 degrees means you'll cover roughly the same vertical and horizontal distances, so the track over the ground is about 1.35 kilometers. 11 seconds sounds luxurious in a sentence. In the cockpit, it's a breath and a half. Every tick is a decision. Confirm the target, check spacing with your element, steady the pipper, mind the flak, level your wings, avoid fixating on the exact truck that annoyed you. Bomb fall time. From a 3,500-foot release, a 500 or 1,000-pounder takes on the order of 15 seconds to reach the road or bridge. Drag stretches it a few more. That delay is not dead time. It's a gift. It lets a pilot lay a string that walks along a road bend, lets the first explosion be a correction for the second, and lets the airplane be somewhere else when the light arrives. Do it right, and the second bomb lands at the culvert or the abutment, the places where roads pretend to be strong. Gun math. The 8 Browning. 50 seconds are always the chorus beneath the bomb's melody. Each gun throws roughly 12-13 rounds per second. Call it an even 100 rounds per second for the set. Each bullet's kinetic energy at the muzzle is on the order of 18,000 joules, about the energy in dropping a 20-kilogram sack of cement from the height of a 2-story roof, packed into a half-inch wide argument that repeats 100 times a second. Multiply, and you get the flavor. The Thunderbolt can pour nearly 2 million joules of kinetic energy per second into the exact 30 yards of road where a truck's radiator lives. The radio call says, "Guns on," but what it means is matter meets intention. Weapon choreography. The ballet is simple. Roll in, steady, drop left bomb, a breath, drop right bomb, and as you brake and unload, squeeze the trigger and stitch the trailing vehicles or the gun pits that thought the dive was the only act. If you're hitting a bridge, you drop both in a measured cadence on the near abutment and the middle span. If it's rolling stock, you aim for the locomotive's boiler and let sympathetic detonation and momentum do the accounting. Accuracy in human terms. 45 degrees, 11 seconds, a pipper the size of a thumbnail covering a truck cab half hidden by a hedgerow. The Jug's mass helps here more than the layman expects. Heavy airplanes are steady airplanes. The moment you push through the burble at the top of the dive, the Thunderbolt's inertia smooths the bumps that would toss a lighter machine's gun sight off by a cab width. The wing is a table, the sight is a thumbtack. Survivability budget. The mathematics of a bomb truck aren't just about what you can deliver, they're about what you can eat and still fly away. A P-47's self-sealing tanks, armor plate, fat radial, and redundant systems transform small mistakes or small victories by the enemy into ugly but survivable stories. The pilot can ride the dive a second longer because the ship will take a lick from light flak. He can hold the trigger a half beat more because the gun harmonization keeps the pattern tight even under buffet. He can brake lower because the wing won't bite him for being human under stress. Sortie economics. A group of P-47 seconds can cycle multiple armed reconnaissance sorties per day because the airplane is deeply unfinicky. It tolerates rough strips, fast turnarounds, and ordnance swaps. Armorers can swing a flight from bombs to rockets to pure gun in the time it takes a rain squall to pass because the pylons make sense and the gun bays were designed for men in gloves. Multiply by units, then by days, and the equation of interdiction emerges with the clarity of a train schedule. Deny bridges, punish daylight traffic, and make every road a rumor. Psychology as a variable. Numbers land hardest when they colonize expectation. If you are a German convoy commander and you believe that a hedgerow lane buys you invisibility at noon, then your calculus for risk includes cigarettes, jokes, and speed. If you live in a world where a fat American fighter dives like a thrown hammer and picks exactly the yard of road where your column is weakest, then your calculus changes. You move at night, you disperse, you slow. The jug's payload is a physics problem for bridges. It's a morale problem for men. Combine those lines of arithmetic, and you get something the enemy didn't plan for, a fighter that can carry, find, and deliver enough explosive force with enough steadiness often enough to turn operational plans into apologies. You don't have to be perfect if you can be present, precise, and persistent. The joke at the start of this chapter wrote itself. A milk bottle with wings. The math at the end of the chapter writes something else. A mobile demolition platform that can self-escort, self-defend, and self-correct at combat speeds. Add it to a system of controllers, maps, and factories, and you get a truth the men on that Normandy lane learned in a single, bright, noisy, minute payload, plus timing beats bravado. It's tempting to explain the Jug's success with metaphors, the hammer, the anvil, the freight train with a cockpit, but the better story lives under the skins and in the ducting. The P-47's specific alchemy of weight, power, and forgiveness is not an accident. It is the direct consequence of parts chosen, drawings signed, and compromises rejected. The Hart, Pratt & Whitney R2800. Drop the cowling and you're looking at a round engine built like a cathedral. 18 cylinders breathing through a 2-row radial, designed to make big power all day and still like you in the morning. The P-47 married that heart to a General Electric turbo supercharger, the secret tunnel that runs down the fuselage, turns exhaust into compressed intake, and hands the engine thick air at altitudes where others starve. That plumbing explains the Jug's bulk. You are carrying a system inside the fuselage, not just an engine. It also explains the airplane's appetite for speed in a dive. When you point a P-47 downhill, the prop bites, the turbo breathes, and the airframe tells the flow, "We're built for this." Propeller and blades. The paddle blade prop on later Jugs is more than a silhouette change. It's a torque translation device, turning the engine's brute into thrust you can count on even with bombs slung and air thick with summer. A long, broad blade gives you authority in the pullout when you're heavy and asking for your life back after a low release. It also gives you confidence on takeoff from fields no one would have chosen before the war. Wing as workbench. The P-47's wing isn't a razor. It's a table broad, thick, and rich in volume. That thickness buys more than fuel space. It buys structural depth. You can bolt big pylons to such a wing and not feel as if you're hanging the family piano off a picture hook. It also buys stability. In a dive, a fat wing is a dampener that soaks up the small gusts and moments that, added together, can throw a lighter, thinner wing off its sight picture. No wing is free. Drag is the receipt. But when you're doing the one job that matters in 1944, bringing explosive argument to a specific meter of road, the wing that steadies the hand wins. Armor and self-sealing. People nod at armor plate and self-sealing tanks as if they are footnotes. They are not. Armor behind the pilot means his spine gets to make tomorrow's decisions. Self-sealing means a P-47 can take a long, ugly knife of a round across a tank and not turn into a torch. The psychology of knowing your machine will try to live even when you make a small mistake or when someone else makes a small success is decisive. A pilot who believes in his margin will press 2 heartbeats closer before the pull, hold a microsecond longer on the trigger. Multiply by squadrons and you have outcomes. Systems that want to be maintained. The airplane is a brute in the air, but it's a gentle giant in the bivouac. Panels open where you need them. Gun bays accept gloved hands and bad lighting. Engine changes are ugly work, but within the competence of men who've been awake for 20 hours and who still joke about coffee. The ducting that makes the turbo work is robust, the linkages are chunky, the bolts are sized for reality. Every one of those mundane decisions turns into sortie count. The jug is not just hard to kill, it is easy to keep alive. Turbo supercharger as doctrine. That G-Chi turbo is the throat that swallows altitude and breathes it back into the R-2800. It is also the reason the fuselage looks like a milk bottle turned bullet. Routing hot gas aft to a turbine, then ramming cooled, compressed air forward, demands space and structure. The payback is consistency. Power available across a broad band of altitudes, predictable behavior in dives, and the ability to haul real bomb loads without feeling like you've betrayed the airplane's essence. Fighters with compact inlines and tight cowlings looked cleaner, but form followed more than fashion here. Form followed function with a plan. Strength in the bones. The primary structure, the spars, frames, longerons, was sized for an airplane, meant to be both fighter and something else. No one could quite name at the beginning. By 1944 the name had found itself. Demolition racer. Heavy ordnance hangs on hardpoints that God would sign off on. Hard pullouts don't set off sympathy groans in the structure. You can feel the quiet of a strong airframe in the way it lands. Honest, square, willing to forgive a crosswind you misjudged because your eyes were still in the fight you just left. Flight controls with manners. The jug's ailerons and elevators are threaded through linkages with a bias towards smooth over twitchy. This is charming at altitude and life, saving in a dive. The airplane lets you carve corrections as if with a dull knife that has been sharpened by time. No sudden bites, no ugly stalls when your heart is hammering and your hands are a bit behind. New pilots discover they can be neat in the jug faster than they expected to be neat in their own minds. That accelerates competence. Weight as virtue. Weight is the sin in most fighter arguments. Here it is a sacrament. Heft becomes stability, stability becomes accuracy, accuracy becomes effect. The P-47 is not the best at a knife fight 2,000 feet over the front lines if you've bolted the kitchen sink under each wing. But the airplane's job at that moment is not knife fighting, it is surgery. The weight steadies the scalpel, interoperability with the war. An airplane is only as good as the war it can plug into. The jug plugs into runways that aren't really runways, ordnance dumps that are yards with fences, and radios that tolerate rain. It plays well with controllers who learned their trade last month, and with artillery officers who still shout into handsets like they're calling cattle. Its fuel likes the cans supply actually delivered, its tires like the dirt we actually have. This is not romance, it is logistics, and logistics is the slower synonym for victory. Take all of that engine, turbo, wing, armor, systems, and you understand how the P-47 became the only answer to a very specific question. Western Europe kept asking from the spring of 1944 onward. Can you carry a frightening amount of explosive to the exact square of map we mean, get it there on a schedule, deliver it without drama, survive the reply, and come back for seconds before dusk? The jug's shape is the answer written in aluminum. The Germans kept the joke because jokes are blankets in bad weather. The pilot kept a pencil because pencils draw dead straight lines. Between them flew a machine that was not a metaphor at all. It was a decision made in metal. We can carry it. We will carry it. And you will feel it. Air war can look like swagger. On the ramp it sounds like checklists and metal. If you were standing a few paces off a P-47 before a late one 944 armed recce, you'd watch the airplane become a promise. Brackets fill, pins slide, wires thread through little holes you only find by touch, and men who have been awake since before dawn decide how to turn steel into decisions. The bomb family, plain English. The jug's headline load 2,500 pounds, usually meant a 1,000-pound general-purpose bomb hung on each wing rack and a 500-pounder on the centerline. General purpose is a tidy name for a brutally simple thing. A thick-cased cylinder designed to be good enough at most jobs. The 1,000-pounders punch holes in bridges and rip rail beds apart. The 500 seconds are the scalpel for culverts, parked aircraft, and the center span you want to nudge into failing rather than vaporize into a fountain. The ground crew roll them across pierced steel plank with a clatter that has its own rhythm shoes on metal, steel on steel. One curse when a dolly wheel catches a seam, the soft swear words of men who don't want to wake a sleeping giant. Pins, shackles, and the language of restraint. Each bomb isn't on the airplane so much as it's held by a quick-change universe that lets ordnance hang heavy and then disappear clean when the pilot flicks his thumb. The shackle is the handshake. The arming wire is the promise not to go off until the air has had its say. Nose and tail fuses are lumps of small engineering that decide when the bomb will tell its story right on impact, instantaneous, or a fraction of a second later, delay. The difference between a photographically satisfying crater and a surgical cut that snaps a bridge where it's already weak. Fuses as tactics. Instantaneous fusing is for soft, exposed targets, trucks, parked aircraft, gun pits with sandbag roofs. You want a slap that turns earth and metal into air and noise. Delayed fusing is for the hard things, bridge abutments, culverts, the concrete that pretends to be forever. A tenth of a second's delay lets the bomb nose inside the material before it speaks, converting blast into leverage. If your goal is to deny a road, you don't aim for the center of the asphalt. You aim for the culvert that lets the road pretend it is stronger than water. There, a 500 with a short delay is not lesser than a 1,000. It is smarter, sequencing, not spraying. The Jugs bombs are not a confetti cannon. They are a sentence with grammar. A practiced pilot in a 40-45 degrees dive will pick his reference, the front bumper of the third truck, the near abutment of the bridge, and walk his pair. Left bomb a breath early, right bomb just after, so the pattern rides along the target line like a ruler laid across the map. The release is measured in human time, one and, not in poetry. It's routine to watch a flight lead drop 1 and 2, then hear his wingman echo the cadence a heartbeat later, so that 4 bombs quilt the road into, before, divided by after. Guns never just extra. Meanwhile the 50 seconds are not there to look mean. They do 2 things that bombs cannot. They shape the scene, and they finish it. Shape how? Imagine a gun pit that always seems to be 2 seconds earlier than your bombs. A brief burst in the P-47s. Roll-in makes the flak crew put their heads down at precisely the moment they're supposed to be perfect. Finish how? You've cut the road with bombs. The tail of the column is trying to reverse into a field. You spray a zipper of tracers across radiators and drivers' doors. The retreat slows into a collage of dead things. The harmonization, the distance at which all 8 gun streams meet, is chosen like a tailor pins a suit. For roadwork, many pilots favor a tighter pattern around 250-300 yards, so the bullet storm is a fist, not a wide grin. Rockets, because some problems are point-shaped, add 5-inch HVARs when the target list leans toward locomotives, gun emplacements, or the kind of bridge that hates concentrated violence. A pair under each wing turns the Jug into a flying bazooka rack. Rockets speak in a deeper register than the 50 seconds. They are punctuation that leaps across the last 50 yards you were planning to cross with your heart in your throat. The launch is a simple, ugly joy. Line, breathe, whoosh, a grey smoke tongue and a spear of intent. The choreography on the ground. Armourers don't just hang iron, they program the show. Intervalometer settings decide whether both wing bombs go together or in a polite cadence. Safety pins bite and are tethered with red streamers like little flags that say, wait. Arming wires thread through fuse veins with a patience that comes from knowing what happens if you get casual. The crew chief's hand always does 2 things before it slaps the pilot's shoulder, tugs at a wire that shouldn't move, and touches a bolt that remembers torque. When the pilot taxis, red streamers whip and flirt. At the run-up, the last man on the ground pulls the last pin and lifts his arm with the flat palm salute that means, you are now armed, we are now trusting each other. Why the Jug carries this better than most? Hanging heavy things under wings isn't special. Doing it without the airplane turning into a drunk is. The P-47's thick wing and generous gear track make taxiing with 2,500 pounds feel like driving a truck, not balancing on a beam. On takeoff, the paddle blade prop grips air like a farmhand, and the R-2800 hauls the whole crew past the point where doubt lives. In the dive, that same mass turns bumps into small lies and makes the pipper behave like a grown-up. Errors that don't turn into funerals. Good doctrine accepts that men will be human in hard moments. The Jug's ordnance system is designed to keep human from becoming headline. A hung bomb, the shackles geometry, the sway braces, and the checklist make a safe jettison more likely than a surprise. A fuse that didn't arm because the wire didn't pull. You'll see it on landing as a crew chief's frown, and a story no one will tell your mother. A ricochet off a hard span? Delay fuse minimized that. Your dive angle did the rest. The airplane's job is to convert competence into results and mistakes into lessons. It does. One last thing, discipline that looks like style. Pilots who survive long enough to be called good, with a straight face, don't spray the world with ordnance like they're watering a lawn. They set up every pass as if it's the first pass, because for someone on the ground it will be the last second. They talk to their wingman like a partner, not a witness. They call off when they're off. They don't fake it. They reserve one pass's worth of ammo in case the universe throws them a target that matters more than the thing they plan to kill. It looks like swagger from the hedgerows. It's actually restraint. A P-47 loaded for bear is not a mood. It's a configuration, a doctrine, and a relationship between men and metal. The airplane doesn't just carry bombs. It carries choices that were made by everyone who touched it, from the man who machined a fuse vane in a factory, to the armourer who threaded the wire, to the pilot who counted 1 and 2. The result is what you saw on that Norman road. Calm, loud, decisive sentences written in steel. Words can make a weapon seem like an animal. Jabbo, jagged bomber, was the German shorthand for the P-47's new job, and the job of every other fighter bomber that made daylight feel expensive. But tactics aren't animals, they're agreements. The Jug's ground attack success came from an agreement between people who had to talk across fear, noise, and maps, controllers, pilots, artillery, and supply. Armed reconnaissance, war by wandering with purpose. Armed recce sounds casual. It isn't. A flight launches with a grid-square diet, a target list, bridges, locomotives, road traffic, flak sites, dumps, and a patrol line that snakes across the enemy's arteries. The job is to find trouble where the map suggests it should be hiding, then kill it or call in friends who can. The difference between a joyride and a hunt is the way the element leads split the sky. One pair low enough to smell cabbage fields, one pair 1,000 feet higher to see around the next bend of hedgerows, and to keep a sliver of altitude for bad surprises. Radios stay disciplined. Red lead, convoy on D-34, 7 vehicles, light flak, moving east. No novels, just addresses. The cab rank, air power as a cue. The British named it, everyone used it. A stack of fighter bombers holding over a battlefield like taxis over a train station, waiting for a controller's whistle. The controller might be a forward air controller with a radio and a pair of binoculars in a church tower, or an artillery officer with a jeep and a map that looked like a crossword. He owns the target list and the why. The cab rank owns the how. Here's how the talk-on sounds when everyone is good at their job. Ridge 1, this is cricket. Smoke on the near bank. Wait. Now. Target is the bridge. East-west. Hit the near abutment first. Approach from the west. Keep your brakes north to de-conflict artillery. You're cleared 2 ships, 2 passes. Cricket, Ridge 1. Tally white smoke. 2 ships, 2 passes. Near abutment. North brakes. No one recites poetry. They say the minimum that keeps humans aligned in a 3-dimensional puzzle. The controller's smoke white for target, red for don't, is a language. The Jug's reply, repeated back, is the contract. Deconfliction. sharing a small sky without dying polite. Artillery doesn't stop because airplanes arrive. The sky therefore has layers, gun target line sectors declared cold for 60 seconds. Fighter, bomber ingress corridors briefed at dawn, pull-out headings that keep you away from friendly flak and into a slice of air someone promised to keep clear. A good pilot reads this invisible geometry as fluently as he reads a windsock. A bad pilot becomes a cautionary tale at the next briefing and a letter in a chaplain's pocket. Formation behavior, hunters not tourists. A four-ship doesn't fly parade when it's about to get dirty. It flies like two knives with two hands. Lead and wingman act as one animal. Lead eyes the sight picture, wingman eyes the world flak, stupid surprises, someone else's bomb line. The second element watches everything the first element misses, and doesn't cross their line unless the target, the controller, or God himself insists. Everyone keeps one rule: leave space in time. A 6-second gap between element drops keeps the second element's bomb fragments from scalping the first element's pullouts. It also keeps the sky from sounding like a single large mistake. Flak as weather. The Germans in 1944 are not incompetent. They scissor light flak through the approach lanes, they hide 20 millimeters under trees, they park a 37 millimeters in a farmyard and pretend it's a wagon. The jug treats flak like the pilot treats crosswind. Note, compensate, don't dignify. You jink near the top of the dive, not in the bottom third where overcorrection becomes an obituary. You vary roll-in headings across the flight so the gunners can't find a rhythm. If a belt-fed sting follows you down the lane every time, you spend your last pass's ammunition on the place the tracers braid out of the hedge. You don't always win that argument, but you make it expensive to keep making it. TOT. Time on target in the small. We think time on target as an artillery trick that brings shells to a moment like a magic trick. Fighter bombers do a humble version. The controller counts, the first element drops, the second element's cadence is the echo, and the 4 bombs arrive within a few breaths, such that a convoy has no between. Trucks that survive the first pair's concussion drag their damaged radiators precisely into the second pair's stream of bullets. Bridges that flex after bomb 1 are torn open by bomb 2. The timing is human scale and therefore achievable all day, not a miracle, a habit. The low-altitude ethos. The jug lives low because that's where the problems live. At treetop height, speed is your armor, and manners are your margin. Fly smooth low, not fast low. Smooth means the radio mast survives the hedgerow, and your wingtip doesn't harvest a weathercock. Smooth means the pipper behaves when you pop up to line a shot, and your brake doesn't translate into a stall with dirt in it. Low work is 1,000 small disciplines performed as if you weren't excited. The P-47 makes that possible by dulling the world's vibrations and rewarding a pilot who holds still. Night and the persistence economy. You won't always get to shoot at trucks at noon. The enemy adapts. He starts moving at dusk. Cab ranks become twilight patrols. The jug's lighting, engine reliability, and general tolerance for clumsy fields mean you can keep a presence in the half-light. You work with artillery flash spotting, harassing fire to keep roads psychologically expensive. You don't need to bag every truck. You need to make movement itself feel like a dare. Why these tactics beat the Jabo problem as the enemy defined it. Germans called fighter bombers J-boss and wrote doctrine to bleed them. Camouflage, dispersal, flak belts, and timing their traffic to dodge patrols. The cab rank plus armed recce combination breaks that logic because it is responsive, not merely persistent. A controller with a radio can translate a battalion commander's panic into a grid square in 30 seconds. A flight already nearby can turn panic into a crater in 60. Between the two sits a system of men who trust each other enough to speak in shorthand. The jug is the last act in that play, and the first one the enemy actually notices. Strip away the romance and you arrive at tactics that look like work. Stack, talk, roll, drop, strafe, climb, clear, report. The genius is not violence, it's coordination. The P-47 is a brutally forgiving machine inside a beautifully unforgiving plan. That is why a word, jabo, that began as a sneer ends as a sigh. Every close-up of a thunderbolt planting a 1,000-pounder on an abutment is a lie of omission. The camera never shows the convoy of fuel trucks that slithered overnight to the advanced landing ground, the pallet of fuses that arrived wrapped in canvas, the crew chief who argued with a stuck cowl fastener at 03:10 with a penknife and a prayer, or the depot clerk who reconciled a spreadsheet that smelled like rain. If you want to understand why the Jug's 2,500-pound truth mattered, you have to widen the lens to the boring miracle. It kept happening. Airstrips that were really decisions. The P-47's footprint tolerates more than neat aerodromes. Park it on pierced steel planking laid over fields the colour of tea. It won't sulk. Its fat tyres and wide gear smear weight across mud that would make a thoroughbred stumble. That forgiving ground manners translate directly into operational reach. If an engineer battalion and a day of decent weather can create a runway you trust, then your fighter bombers can sleep close enough to the front that their first pass is a warm-up, not a ferry flight. Turnaround math. Minutes as weapons. A sortie does not end when a pilot taxis in and pops the canopy. It ends when the same airframe clamps its wheels off the earth again. Crews make a rhythm of it. Fuel first, bombs while fuel runs, ammo while bombs are wired, oil as needed. Tires glanced at with a hand that knows what a rumour feels like. Good units can turn a jug in the kind of time a man needs to smoke a cigarette and decide whether to write to his mother. That speed is not rushing. It's choreography learned by repetition and protected by the rule that no one rushes alone. Everyone's hands are on the airplane at once. Eyes cross-check eyes. Spares like oxygen, not perfume. You can't be brave without parts. Engines sit in crates not as ornaments but as a promise. If a jug chews a cylinder, the answer is not a sad nod. The answer is a swap that gets that airframe back into the queue. Tires stacked like loaves keep a squadron from treating every gravel chip as an omen. Prop blades in racks make prop strikes an inconvenience, not a curse. None of this is glamorous. All of it is sovereignty. A squadron that can heal itself can fight at the tempo tactical success demands. Ammunition as diet, not dessert. The 8 guns don't eat randomly. Belts are built with a thought about the day. Armour, piercing incendiary for locomotives and engine blocks. Ball to bulk the belt and keep the feed gentle. Tracers in a pattern that informs without lying. Armourers thread in their own preferences like a chef salts by instinct 1 in 5 tracers for this pilot because he tends to walk long, 1 in 7 for that pilot because his eye is already a metronome. The result is ethical. Rifles aim at men. 50-seconds aim at machines. The effect on morale is identical. Bomb depots, fuse lockers, and the empire of dull paperwork. The front exists because somewhere in the rear a sergeant with a pencil built a religion around stock numbers. General-purpose bombs arrive with paperwork that says what lots the fuses came from, who inspected them, and how long they'll sit before the oil inside them decides to have opinions. When a flight lead requests a short delay fuse for a culvert run, an ordnance corporal doesn't shrug. He opens a box, checks the sheet, and issues parts that will behave like physics say they should. Wars are won by men who translate pleas into delivered with no romance and no excuses. Fuel as the secret weapon. A P-47 that hauls 2,500 pounds to a target will drink like a thirsty horse if the pilot asks it to. Forward fuel dumps therefore become shrines. Trucks that carry 100 octane become the artery no one tweets about. Engineers lay hose lines across meadows. Men pump through the night. A corporal logs every troop that took 5 gallons more than he liked, so that tomorrow's convoy won't be a wish. Air power is logistics, wearing a roar as a hat, weather, mud, and persistence. Autumn in Western Europe loves rain, mud loves wheels. Yet the sortie rate remains the dull miracle again, because the system plans for bad luck. Steel planking gets laid a panel thicker at the taxiway's soft spot. Sand and cinders soak the worst puddles. A gang with shovels walks the runway after every downpour like a priest walks a nave. If the sky opens a window, airplanes are already at idle, warmed, bombed and bored of waiting. Standardization. The American heresy. The Jagdwaffe late in the war is a museum of variants. The Allied fighter groups prefer sameness. The same fuses fit the same bombs that mate the same pylons that are serviced by the same wrenches. The same engines bolt to the same mounts. This monotony of choice is a monarch's dream. It turns supply from a drama into a habit. It also turns training into a staircase instead of a ladder. Learn on one jug. You can fix another jug. That means turnover doesn't murder tempo. Numbers without romance. A squadron that launches 2 armed Rexes in the morning and 1 in the afternoon, with 6 to 12 aircraft each time, throws a small city's worth of metal at the enemy's roads in a day. Multiply by a group, then by the days between rainstorms, and you get hard arithmetic. Thousands of bombs a month, hundreds of thousands of 50 caliber rounds, translated into dead bridges, dead locomotives and broken morale. The point isn't to dazzle with digits. It's to make clear that the miracle pass you saw in a newsreel is the median of a distribution with a very fat middle. Culture. Competence feels like calm. The best supply sergeants are boring on purpose. The best crew chiefs are affectionate for their airplanes the way a farmer loves a tractor. It does work, and it will do more if you treat it like a partner. The best pilots come back with small notes, not complaints. Shorter delay next time for the bridge at St. Something. Tracers were a hair thick. Let's go 1 in 6. That culture takes the sharp edges off war and turns fear into checklists. The jug makes this culture easy because it doesn't punish small human flaws with immediate death and doesn't demand sorcery to remain airworthy under pressure. Put this together and the industrial picture isn't a boast about factories. It's a diagram of inevitability. Iron arrives. Men who know where it goes put it there. Airplanes that are built to suffer with good manners haul that iron to addresses the enemy cannot afford to protect. And this repeats with such regularity that the only reasonable reaction is to stop moving by day and hope the night is kinder. The P-47's 2,500-pound reputation is really a sentence that begins on a production line and ends in a culvert. The clause in the middle, the sortie, exists only because the economy behind it chooses to keep promises. No army is dumb when it's cornered. The German response to the fighter-bomber plague wasn't a shrug. It was a suite of countermeasures that, on paper, should have raised the price of a daylight road. Camouflage, dispersion, flak belts, decoys, night movement, jets, each a clever answer to a specific American habit. And yet the P-47's pressure kept turning cleverness into triage. Here's why. Camouflage and deception met persistence and proximity. The first sensible reaction to being hunted from the sky is to stop being visible. Trucks wear branches, locomotives hide under sheds, fuel dumps dress like cowsheds, and gun pits pretend they're haystacks. It helps until you remember that movement is the signature, not paint. Armed reconnaissance doesn't require you to glow. It requires you to be where a map says a road and a mission say you must be. A jug pair at treetop height will flush camouflaged traffic the way pheasants flush from hedgerows, by making the world suddenly noisy. Once you break or wiggle out of a field, every disguise becomes choreography. The P-47 doesn't need to see a truck. It needs to see the idea of a truck making a bad decision. Dispersal. Smart at the depot, brittle on the road. Dispersing aircraft on airfields and vehicles in woodlines blunts bombers and confuses spotters. But dispersal turns convoys into single files and depots into many small piles. The jug's weapons love strings and small piles. A single delayed fuse 500-pounder dropped on the one bridge, a dispersed column must cross, creates a traffic jam that turns dispersion into a killbox. A brief burst of 50 seconds across a spread of parked trucks turns many little rumors into many little fires. Dispersal delays decisive movement. Fighter bombers weaponize delay. Flak belts. Teeth with limited stomachs. The Germans ring key points with 20mm and 37mm guns, and the belts hurt. A sloppy P-47 element will pay. But belts mean guns. Guns mean ammunition. Ammunition means resupply, and the road to resupply is a road. The more flak you emplace, the more logistics you expose to the very air attacks you're trying to blunt. Good jug units don't dual belts forever. They mark, avoid, or call in artillery to pluck teeth. Controllers shift cab ranks to gaps and attack the bridges that feed the belts. The flak that remains creates no-go bubbles that pilots learn, like bad neighborhoods, simply fly around and kill the thing the belt was meant to protect. Decoys and dummies versus talk, on, and habit. A fake truck is convincing until a pilot has done 24 armed Rexys and can smell rubber. A dummy airfield fools a camera. It doesn't fool a forward controller whose infantry is being bracketed at grid 2, 1, 2, 4, 8, 3, and wants the road at 2, 1, 0, 4, 8, 0 turned into mud now. The cab rank system moves from photograph to phone call. Decoys live in the photographic war. The jug lives in the conversational one. Night movement. A logical adaptation with ugly side effects. Shifting traffic to dusk and darkness dodges daylight patrols. It also concentrates movement into windows. The Allies quickly learn to pollute with harassment fire, flares, and night intruders. The jug's full contribution here is psychological as much as kinetic. Make day travel terrifying, and the enemy has to move in clumps when visibility is worst. Bridges get hit at dawn anyway. Morning finds columns bottled on the wrong side of the river, and cab ranks make breakfast rough. Jets and the myth of antidotes. The Me-262 and other late-war Luftwaffe answers look, in hindsight, like magic bullets. They weren't. They were scalpels issued to a patient bleeding everywhere. A jet can kill a jug when the equations line up. Find, close, fire, extend, disappear. But jets drink fuel and ammunition like famine, require airfields that hate being near the front, and don't love loitering. They are the wrong tool to swat dozens of small, low, scattered fighter bombers. Meanwhile, the P-47's job does not demand aerial heroics. It demands presence. Even when jets take a bite, the bridge still dies because the second element rolls in and the cab rank delivers redundancy. The enemy cannot be everywhere. The jug can be often. Railway resilience versus targeted fragility. German railway troops were brave and fast. They could patch a rail bed overnight and have trains running by morning, but a culvert blown under both rails takes more than shovels. An abutment cracked by a delayed fuse 1000 is a geometry problem, not a carpentry one. The P-47's load and fuse doctrine select for the kinds of damage that consume time, not just manpower. Time is the resource the enemy has least of. Rail repair crews become heroes with no strategic effect. Morale math, maybe, is a poison. Soldiers can endure horror if it's episodic. They fold when horror becomes routine. By late 1944, roads under daylight sky are a maybe. Maybe you get there. Maybe the next bend holds a radio man and a calm voice who will pull a silver hammer out of the Sunday. Maybe the hedgerow hides a 20mm that will save you for 20 seconds and then die loud. Maybe the convoy reverses. Maybe it burns. Maybe is corrosive. It slows planning, shrinks initiative, and elevates rumor to policy. Against maybe, the jug's promise we will be there again this afternoon is the quiet brutality that ends jokes. Resource starvation, the invisible ally. Even perfect German adaptations need fuel, ammo, and competent men to operate them. Air superiority, interdiction, and the bombing campaigns starve those inputs. A flak belt with no shells is landscaping. A dispersed column with empty tanks is sculpture. A jet without fuel is a rumor. The P-47 doesn't single-handedly create that starvation, but it exploits it mercilessly. Every delayed, fuse bomb across a culvert doesn't just explode rock, it detonates schedules. Why this all adds up to failure despite local successes. Here's the unromantic ledger. Camouflage saves a truck today and costs a truck tomorrow when the column hesitates at the wrong bend. Dispersal saves an airfield from a single bomber and ensures a road stays clogged long enough for fighter bombers to feast. Flak kills a jug on Tuesday and diverts shells that an infantry platoon would have killed for on Wednesday. Jets win a combat report and lose 5 bridges because they cannot loiter. Night travel dodges the noon patrol and delivers a dawn traffic jam to a cab rank with fresh coffee. German soldiers at the sharp end are not fools. They adapt as well as anyone can under the conditions they have. But adaptation is a tax. The jug and its system, the controllers, the depots, the boring miracles, make sure the tax is collected every day until the treasury runs dry. The nickname Jabo began as a slur, matured into a curse, and ended as a synonym for inevitability. The men who once laughed at the flying milk bottle do not laugh because their mouths are full of dust. The iron that falls from a P-47 doesn't negotiate. It doesn't even hate. It just arrives, the 28th of June 1944, 14:05 hours. A pale sun leans through scattered cumulus over the Via Valley. Cricket, this is Ridge 1. 2 ship on station with 2,500 each. Fuel green. The controller's voice arrives like a knuckle on a door. Ridge. I've got a rail bridge at grid 207461 east-west span, locomotive reported inbound. White smoke on near bank in 10 seconds. The jug pair ride a racetrack at 6,000 feet, while the scene assembles itself below river like a dull knife, fields like a quilt. The bridge, a piece of punctuation. White smoke flowers. The lead checks wind and drift, then tips the nose, the canopy frame carving a diagonal through the cloud. The dive is a rehearsal that's done this 100 times. 45 degrees. Throttle a hair back to keep the prop from outrunning the engine. Left hand lifts the pickle guard. Sight, Pippa, just at the near abutment's roofline. The bridge isn't. Your target, the joint is. Pickle 1, pickle 2. The bombs clap free and become little suns falling with opinions. Lead eases, rolls level, and as he breaks north he wakes the 50 seconds with a half-second line across a flak pit that forgot to be humble. The gunner's courage turns into a churned rectangle of mud. Wingman counts his 6 seconds of separation and begins the same equation. His Pippa drifts, wind nibble, then settles. Pickle. He drags the right wing a whisper to walk his second bomb 3 car lengths farther along the span. On the pull, the world widens and the bridge narrows into the center of everything. Bomb 1 lands like a statement. Bomb 2 is the lawyer. The near abutment coughs rock and old lime. The span hums. Then the middle panels shrug downward like a man dropping his shoulders after a bad letter. The river accepts the wreckage without sympathy. A locomotive whistles in the distance, brakes squealing into irrelevance. Good hits, Ridge. Confirm span compromised. Can you work the yard? White rows of wagons sit a kilometre east beneath roofs, meant to wish away airplanes. The pair run parallel with the line and tuck low, crossing at mast height. Guns on. Tracers sprinkled just enough to whisper where the storm is going. Bullets bite boiler domes and burst water into white ghosts. They rake couplers and wheels, turning linkage into scrap that will never align again. Wingman flicks a pair of rockets at the turntable. One goes high, one goes home, and the turntable's pit transforms into a muddy mouth. The flak wakes properly now, 20 millimeters insects, angry and precise. Lead loiters just long enough to make the gunner's second attempt a wasted hymn. Then he's away, vectoring to a road crossing where, like the end of a bad joke, a truck column waits at a gate that used to be a bridge approach. They didn't get the memo. The gun's roar becomes administration. Radiators, cabs, fuel cans. One bicycle with a man on it, who drops. Stands, drops again. Ridge, off east. Winchester rockets. 1 pass each. The controller's voice is already thinking about the next square. Copy. Be advised, second pair inbound for yard. Thanks for opening. That's the logic of interdiction made plain. Deny the span, punish the alternative, and hand the mess to the next shift. The jug pair climbs into the light, empty of bombs, heavy with silence. The railroad will claim the bridge can be patched within a day. Maybe it can if Stone remembers how to be whole and if the night is raining miracles. What will not be patched is the schedule. Repair crews will dance under lamps. A new day will find a culvert cratered downstream. Another cab rank will thicken the delays. The enemy's timetable will turn into a suggestion. Suggestions do not move armies. When people later say air superiority, what they mean is this: a controller, 2 calm voices, 4 bombs, and a bridge that doesn't show up for work. June 6 became a verb, but the verb only mattered because the days after it learned to keep the road dangerous. From the morning the beachheads held, thunderbolts began to live on a schedule. First light-armed recce, mid-morning cab rank, over whichever corps commander's arrows were fattest, an afternoon hunt for convoys that believed hedgerows and luck could replace bridges and fuel. The airplane that once climbed to high cover now became a ground animal with wings. The hedgerow maze made ambush a geometry problem. P-47 seconds solved it with persistence and nerves. Pilots learned the smell of low, wet clay and diesel. They learned the color of opportunity dust where there shouldn't be dust. A convoy gives itself away by how the shadows under the trucks move. A column under air threat never moves like water. It moves like someone creeping over glass. That creeping is target designation in human form. Controllers sitting with infantry could smell it too. Ridge. This is cricket bypass. At St. Clair is jammed. Traffic nose to tail. Hit the near end. Let them try to reverse. The first week was chaos that grew teeth. Flyers married doctrine to habit. Wingmen stopped chasing targets outside the element's slice. Leads stopped talking for poetry and started speaking for timing. Ordnance teams found their rhythm. Delay fuses on bridges, instantaneous on road traffic. Rockets held for locomotives and the cocky gun pits that thought they could embarrass heavy wings. The rhythm showed up in German diaries as mood. We cannot move by day without loss. By night we move, and in the morning the bridges are gone again. By July, the jug had become a toll on every mile. The capture of forward strips pushed the queue closer. Turnaround times tightened until the air felt like an assembly line. It wasn't always dramatic. Many sorties ended with nothing to brag about. A truck burned, a culvert shattered, a railway switch mangled, a small dump turned into a black puddle. The sum of dull successes equals decisive. Infantry who once counted on maps began to count on the sound that arrived before lunch and after. The noise became a promise. When the breakout came around Saint-Lô, the air and ground story snapped together. The hedgerow prison door opened. German attempts to shift reserves became a target-rich migration. Highways turned into confessionals. The P-47s 2,000, 500 pounds, suddenly felt like the right number at the right time, big enough to create craters that denied movement, small enough to be carried in quantity, accurate enough to be placed where roads pretend to be strong. Lead flights cut bridges. Following flights chopped columns that bunched at detours. Artillery joined in with time-on-target strikes that met jugs' passes like rhyming couplets. The landscape did not become a battlefield so much as a machine that favoured one side's habits. German countermeasures ran, as ever, a beat behind. A flak belt appeared around a key crossing. The beating the P just beat around. Cab rank slid 20 degrees and destroyed the bridge feeding the belt. Traffic went by night. Dawn brought controllers with thermoses and fresh pencils. A jet cut down a careless fighter bomber. The next 4 jug passes still arrived and the road still died. Courage was abundant on both sides. Fuel was not. What makes the Normandy to break out arc matter isn't a single spectacular run or a fetish for statistics. It's the way an airplane built to be a fighter learned to be a utility. The jug was a socket wrench in a toolkit. Not elegant, not the poster queen, but the one thing you reached for 10 times a day because it always fit. That dependability turned D-Day's shock into the habit of forward motion. Every army wants miracles. The P-47 gave something harder to defeat. Repetition. Accounting is not romance, but it is victory's handwriting. The ledger a Thunderbolt squadron kept would look boring to anyone who didn't know how to read it. Dates, sorties, loads, fuel burned, bombs dropped, rounds expended, targets claimed, the aircraft serviceable next day. In those rows lived the quiet violence that made roads expensive and timetables dishonest. Consider a week in midsummer, 3 daily launches morning, noon, late afternoon, averaging 8 aircraft per go. That's 24 sorties a day, with perhaps 2/3 carrying full 2,500-pound bomb loads and the balance slinging rockets or flying gun-heavy Rexes. Call it comfortably 40,000 pounds of high explosive delivered across 7 days, not counting rockets. Add in gun consumption. At a conservative 250 rounds per aircraft per sortie, you're looking at 6,000 rounds a day into vehicles, rails and flak. None of those numbers win a newspaper headline. All of them eat a campaign alive from the edges. Now pair that output with input. Fuel convoys arriving on schedule, spare engines on slings, tires by the dozen, pallets of fuses that match the briefed tactics, and tools that fit the bolts you actually have. Replace 2 engines, patch a pair of runways, rotate 3 props, write off 1 airframe chewed by a 20mm burst, and still launch on time tomorrow. If the word inevitability needs a definition, it is this ability to replenish the machine without drama. The scoreboard also tallies denials, not just kills. A bridge down for 2 days is 2 days of everything behind it arriving late or not at all. A wrecked locomotive is more than twisted steel. It's the absence of hundreds of train. Miles during the week the works tries to make a new one from a continent that's run out of metal. A column scattered by afternoon air doesn't arrive at night to reinforce a line that will fold tomorrow at dawn. Every tally line that says culvert blown or span dropped is a sentence in a book titled "You are not going where you planned." Moral accounts show up too, poorly captured in ink. Infantry who write home that the sky is on their side. Enemy drivers who begin to flinch at cloud shadows. Forward controllers who discover that a calm voice and a smoke grenade can move the weight of a warehouse with a radio. The Jug's 8 guns look like anger, but in the ledger they are policy, a steady transfer of confidence from one army to another. It's fashionable to treat war stories as collections of extremes, ace tallies, improbable rescues, singular explosions. The Jug's chapter in the ledger is profound because it is median. It normalizes violence at a scale that changes what logistics can promise and what officers dare to plan. The end state of that normalization is not a sky littered with heroics. It's a horizon full of trucks that don't move when you need them to. That's a scoreboard without glamour. It is also how you end wars sooner than you otherwise would. The joke was easy because the airplane looked wrong. People saw volume and mistook it for vanity. They saw weight and mistook it for clumsiness. A war cured them. The P-47's shape was a confession that it expected to carry, to dive, to pull, to be shot at, and to come back while still wanting to go again. In 1944, that set of expectations turned out to be a perfect match for what Western Europe needed from an airplane. On that Norman lane, the men who laughed at a flying milk bottle learned a truth that doctrine later wrote in kinder fonts. Weapon systems are their schedules as much as their silhouettes. The Jug's schedule available this morning, accurate at noon, survivable at dusk, erased options with the dull patience of weather. Bridges weren't symbols. They were appointments the enemy kept missing. Columns weren't prey so much as processes that stopped working under observation. The airplane didn't care about bravado or rumour. It cared about grids and time. If there is a single sentence to remember, it's this. The mathematics of the P-47 weren't only about lift, drag and bomb fall. They were about turning repetition into certainty. 2,500 pounds at a time, placed by men who sounded bored over the radio, clawed daylight away from an army that needed it to move. The laughter at the start of the summer collapsed into a silence broken only by the noise of engines and the hiss of bombs, familiar sounds that meant the same thing every day. You are late, you are stuck, you are seen. History has room for elegance and for hammers. The Thunderbolt was a hammer with the soul of a utility knife. It didn't ask to be admired, it asked to be used. The men who used it turned the sky into a working schedule, and schedules, not slogans, decide who arrives where with what. In the end, the P-47's broad back carried less a myth than a habit. Habits win wars. And when habits weigh 2,500 pounds apiece, no one is laughing.